Hello. Okay. Jennifer, you can hear us?
Yes.
Liz is on too. Perfect. All right, welcome everybody. All right, great. Okay. Time being 1:31, I'll call the March 26th, 2025 special STRGBA GSA meeting to order. Here in the room, we have a quorum, so everybody's here. City of Oakdale, or actually, I'll start over with Mike, so I'm gonna go from the right, work my way all the way back here. So Mike Pitcock from City of Waterford is here. We've got Brad Klinkenbeard from the City of Oakdale. Welcome. Yes. Your first meeting. We've got Darren Smallin from the City of Riverbank. We've got Paul Pichelle from Modesto Irrigation District. Christy McKinnon here on my left from Stanislaus County, and Tim Barahona from City of Modesto. Welcome everybody. Thanks for attending. Moving right on to number 2, business from the public. So at this time, interested persons are welcome to introduce any topic within the GSA's jurisdiction. Matters presented under this heading may be discussed, but no action will be taken by the GSA at this meeting. It's not required, but speakers may provide their name and address. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. So we will open it up to the public. Seeing none here in the room, no hands raised on the phone. We'll move right along. Item number 3. This is these are the minutes from the March 12th meeting. Assuming everyone has had a chance to review those meeting minutes, I will entertain a motion.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Motion by Paul, second by Darren. Brad, did you want to recuse yourself on this one since you weren't at the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'll entertain any kind of comments, feedback from the board members or committee members here first. Okay, open it up to the public for comments on the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
Everybody missed me. I was sitting there and
All right. I didn't notice that. I get you on the list, Mr. Burketto. The record show John Burketto is on the list of other attendees here. Any other public comment? Okay. Bring it back to the board. Do you mind amending the motion to include that one edit?
I'm in the motion to include that and the other attendees.
Perfect. And Darren, still comfortable seconding that?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And the record will show that Brad also recused. So. Thank you. Carries. Item number 4, approve water year 2024 annual report. So there was a presentation made at the last meeting on the annual report. So we had a lot of questions and good discussion and feedback on that. There was one comment letter received between then and now that was forwarded on to everybody back on the 19th of March, Wednesday the 19th. So hopefully you had a chance to read that letter. Those comments were mainly project related, so would not, we didn't think would result in any adjustments and revisions to the annual report. So it is ready to be uploaded as soon as we take action at this meeting. So that'll open up to comments from the committee on the annual report.
I do have one comment in general. It's an annual report, so obviously each year you can change and update things. I think there may have been some concern with some of the data from the state. Some things I'd like to spend a little more time delving into. So let's say we find out something later and like things to be amended. I assume we would probably study something if we had to. Also keeping in mind it is an annual report, so if we find something out here. So I guess in general, I'd move that we approve it. That was just kind of me thought and question to that. Anybody wants to chime in? Just acknowledge it maybe.
No, I agree. There were some good comments. I think every year, this is one thing that's nice about the report is because we're doing it annually, it's kind of a report card. You can see how you're doing. You can see what's changing. Year to year, things are going to naturally change as you go. So understanding every year how that affects kind of some of the water balances mainly and budgets in each of those management areas is good for us to reassess. This is a fluid process. The annual report helps us learn and build upon that before we end up doing an update. So we'll be doing an update in 2027, which means to the GSP, which means we'll be really working on that for the most part. Yeah, pretty soon, starting like October, essentially, and throughout next year.
Take a good look at all the comments, concerns and stuff, so next year we can make that much better.
Yep. The better data we have, the better the report will be, and the better the model will be, and the more useful it will be as a tool. Agree 100%. Good comments. Anybody else? Okay. I'll open it up to the public before I entertain a motion on the annual report.
Can we talk about some of the screen, the presentation last week at this time?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Do you push the button on that mic so
This one?
the light turns green on there?
John Burchetto.
Thank you.
I live here in Oakdale Farm here in the Oakdale Irrigation District exclusively. I thought the presentation last week was excellent. I think it clearly showed that Oakdale adds to the underground. Modesto looks like it's a balance between what they pull out and what they contribute to the underground. And the east side clearly just does one thing, pumps the underground with no replenishment. I have, for the last 25 years, been acquiring agricultural land, and it's a conscious business decision to buy land in the district of mine. That allows me to pump out of a ditch surface water. 99.5%. The only thing we pump is frost water, a few hours, few days, a year. Okay. Those of us in the districts clearly are not contributing to this underground depletion. You have to recognize that the county represents everybody, just not the outside, the landowners east. They represent the districts, the west side and the east side. And I think you really got to watch this approach as you go along, that who is creating this problem and who needs to pay for the result. It's clearly a lot of people at the time we were planting the almonds in that hill pasture. I literally sold hill pasture, and I took that money and bought in district to get out of that situation. And a lot of people were greedy, and they went up there east of Oakdale and bought 3 acres, and I sat down here and paid 3 times the price and bought 1 acre. I packed a lot of debt, and at 5 or 6% interest, I'm paying a lot of interest. And that was just for the sole purpose of having a good source of water in a ditch, surface water. Now that this problem has been created, I don't see any reason why those people that made a conscious business decision to buy land down here have to pay for that poor decision or the greed of having 3 acres up there to one of ours, and they're depleting this underground water. I don't see any reason why we should be paying for that too. We have our own issues we need to pay for down here. Additional debt, interest, and principal costs. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to make a comment on the 2024 annual report, 2024 water year annual report? Okay, seeing none in the room and seeing no hands raised, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve water.
1 second, Dustin.
Thank you. Any further comment from the committee? Okay, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we will get that filed here in the next day or so. So we're ahead of the schedule on beating that due date of April 1st. Thank you, everybody. Again, good job by Todd, Groundwater, and Woodard and Curran on putting that all together. So topic number 5. This is the Valley Water Collaborative update. Perry Clausen, who is the executive director, has a presentation. Give me a second. I gotta share my screen here.
While you're opening that, well, thank you for inviting me again to this meeting to talk to you about Valley Water Collaborative. I appreciate the invitation. And I was here, how many years ago now? 3 years ago, 2 years ago, talking about opening the door to have a conversation about forming an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the GSA and Valley Water. I want to continue that conversation, begin it again, initiate it again for a couple of reasons. I'll go through the presentation to give an overview of where we are right now, but we submitted one of our milestone deliverables last year called the Management Zone Implementation Plan. And one of the comments we got back from the Regional Water Quality Control Board was you need to set up formal agreements with the GSAs that are encompassed by your organization, by the management zone. So it was not much more specific than that as far as what they want us to have an MOU about. And which is kind of interesting that the water board would do that in that vein, but we can figure it out. I figured that gives us the flexibility to decide and look at what we both do, what you all do, what we do, where we can help each other in our compliance with the state, ultimately the State Water Resource Control Board. So I shared a draft MOU that the GSA that is on the Delta Mendota Basin, groundwater basin, all the GSA GSPs that are over there under one group. I sent to Eric the almost final draft of that MOU as a starting point that you all can consider in whatever form you would, and then we go back and forth with our lawyers to decide what it is we can and can't do, you all can do and we can do, etc., to benefit both of our programs. So that's the ask for the day. But I want to also go through this PowerPoint to give you an idea. 3 years ago, we were just getting off the ground, and I'll race through these slides. You have a chance to look through your handout and hit on the key points. And so keep on going to the next slides here. So this describes what our organization is. We're an administrative entity that manages the nitrate control program for the dischargers in the beginning of Modesto Turlock groundwater basins. We've expanded, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we administer that program on behalf of the permit holders who have nitrates in their waste discharge requirements. So that includes, go to the next slide. The areas in the Central Valley that are impacted by groundwater, it's in this map, recently were moved into the program based on a prioritization process.
Right slide, so when you're up.
Yeah, I guess we're looking at, okay, I know what I did. I just parts of it. Okay. Yes. Okay. So we're here of the board of directors as our management of the organization. We now also have additional basins that I'll talk about in a second that are managed by advisory committees. They report back to the board of directors, which you can see the way the representation of the board is set up with irrigated ag, municipalities, cities, food processor, winery, dairy, and poultry, all of which have waste discharge permits from the regional water board because their waste to land includes nitrate. And I listed on the right-hand side all the cities that are participating in the Modesto and Turlock Basin at this time by supporting the organization. Okay, and then next slide. So Regional board had a prioritization process 4 years ago where the worst were first, as I have said or may say, and the worst basins in the Central Valley for nitrate contamination are Modesto, Turlock, Chowchilla, the Kings Basin, which encompasses Fresno, Cahuilla Basin, and the Tule Basin. So those were the priority one basins. Last year, the regional board notified the priority 2 basins that have nitrate contamination, not as bad as a priority 1. And the basins you see listed here on the map or shown on the map have joined Valley Water as an administrative organization to help them comply with the nitrate control program. So starting the beginning of March, we rolled out the program to these basins, advertising free domestic well testing and also providing bottled water if their wells exceed the nitrate standard. Just, I don't have this in the chart, but since March 1st, 30 days, almost 30 days later, we've gotten about 300 applications to the program in all of these basins. And so again, we operate as the administrative organization. We have staff and the ability to do outreach and such to reach the communities that are in each of these basins. And one of the plans that we have to submit is reflected in the map on the right. We take the data of nitrate detections over the last 10 years, 15 years now in these basins and do this grading map to show us where our high vulnerability areas are for nitrate contamination. And so what we do is develop mailing lists and mail to the private well owners that are in these areas and offer them free well testing. And the law requires that if they are above the nitrate standard, we provide free bottled water. This doesn't affect cities or public water systems. This is a domestic well-focused program only. Okay, so going to the next slide. So since we started in 2021, 4 years ago, we've had 1,680 applications to the program. You can see the numbers there. 260 were not eligible, and these were people that lived in the city of Modesto, for instance. They're not eligible because their water is safe, or they applied and were not in the Modesto Turlock Basin. We have sent almost 900 applicants to Geoanalytical for sampling. We have 650, roughly 650 residents receiving bottled water at not insignificant cost. And you can see down below of the wells we tested, 70% are above the nitrate standard. So the mapping that we did is proving to be pretty accurate insofar as the condition of the shallow aquifer where these domestic wells tend to be drawing their water from. Okay, to the next slide. So when we set up the program, we used a database system that allows us to track not only the applicants on a geospatial standpoint, but also showing where our bottled water recipients are, also where in the amount of water they've been receiving, how long they've been receiving it, how many are in the household, and so we have some pretty good demographics of the water recipient. So the way that the nitrate control program works is what I just described is what's called the early action plan. When the basin plan was adopted in 2020 at the regional water board level and state water board level, they allowed the permit holders to get 35-year extension on the deadline to meet the discharge limit out of their wastewater treatment plants and farm fields and dairies and other, in exchange for getting this free bottled water and free well testing. However, contingent on that, going to the next slide, we also have to put forward long-term solutions, what they call. The regional board considers bottled water an interim solution. So we are now in the phase in Modesto and Turlock, and this will begin in 3 years in the other basins. We have to develop long-term solutions for these recipients of bottled water. And this is a huge undertaking. Some of the 4 top long-term solutions are consolidation with a public water system. So you connect pipeline or otherwise pipeline to a city public water system that's nearby. You create a small water system using one well to service maybe 4 or 5 houses. A lot of undertaking to do that. Or the other 2 are under sink treatment or reverse osmosis that's under sink to remove the nitrate on a household by household basis. or install water fill stations in public water systems that are near these nitrate contaminated areas. So those are really only options that we've been able to identify for long-term solutions. So what we are doing now, Valley Water is doing in our area is, and I want to jump 2 slides here, 3 slides to show you we have identified the initial focus areas. And because the area is so big, Modesto Turlock Basin, we've identified where the disadvantaged communities are, where the income is lower level, where they have obviously high nitrates, and where they have a potential for possibly connecting to a public water system. So we as you can see on this, the next slide, that we have these both Modesto and Turlock basins, and we've begun holding community outreach meetings in each of these areas. Out of the 8 that we have total, we've had meetings in 5 of the areas. We've got a couple more to do. The Hillmar in the Turlock Basin, and Sirius Houston also in the Turlock Basin. But we've done these, all of these in the Modesto area. Turnout has been, should I be kind, disappointing. We have addresses for all of our water addresses for people that don't get water. We call them, we mail them, and we get a dozen people to show up. And so this is a requirement. You all have gone through this, I'm sure in your GSA, there's a requirement. We have to go to the communities and say, what do you want? What's your long-term solution options? So we're doing surveys, trying to get a sense for what folks feel like are going to be appropriate solutions. And then we have to take that into a planning process with not only the water board, state water board as well. We currently have a SAFER grant that's providing funding for some of these solutions. But what we're prioritizing, because we have so much to do, is find out obviously what the needs are in these IFAs, begin developing plans, look at what other projects may have been in the works that predate us that we can help facilitate. What we have stated obtusely and directly to the water board is we cannot afford to put pipelines to 650 residences to public water systems. There's not enough money in all the industries, all the cities to pay for that. So we've got to figure out a way to do either the under sink treatment or any other options. Maybe it's continued bottled water. In fact, in some of these meetings, we ask people, are you fine with bottled water? And over half of them say, bottled water's fine. In fact, I don't want to connect to the city, can't afford to do a water system, and they're pretty much saying they're satisfied with that. But we're going to need to collect that information and take it to the state board and tell them this is what people are thinking. So I skipped over some of the slides that are a lot more detailed than I need to verbalize about what it is our responsibilities are, what it is we have to show in this interim time period for the Modesto and Turlock bases. But shortly after, well, in 3 more years, we're going to be doing the same thing in these other basins that were added recently. And then I just have one slide here I wanted to show you about the SAFER grant that we are that was granted to our organization. And SAFER is, you can see the acronym under the bullet there, the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. This comes out of the greenhouse gas reduction program that the state has. It's about 130 million goes to SAFER. And so we're doing 5.5 million to do additional contaminant testing. And SAFER is covering 100% of those contaminants. They're covering half of our sampling costs. Because Valley Water is responsible for nitrate. That's our responsibility. That's what we're formed for. So we're helping the state out by doing this additional sampling. And if you go to that next slide, you can see that we are finding uranium in the wells that we're sampling. These are domestic wells. 123 TCP is an emerging contaminant that was, I guess, some of the drinking water folks know they just dropped the standard for that. So it's showing exceedances, also arsenic, and then these legacy pesticides are almost non-existent, as is chromium, chromium that we're testing for. So what happens is, if there's nitrate with a SAFER grant, if there's nitrate in these other contaminants, they split the water costs with us, the bottled water costs, and then they pay for half of the outreach and some of the some of the administration that it takes to do the process the applications. And so it's worked out well. We received 5.5 million. I don't think we burned through $1 million yet. It's just it's hard to get people to sign up for this program. Amazingly hard. We have in the Modesto Turlock identified 3,500 domestic wells that are in the red areas. We've had 1,000 applications. So there's a lot of people that get our postcards that throw it in a trash, and we hear from our folks that are on the ground that are tabling events and such that the geo-tracker reporting requirement is a big discouragement. That's part of that because the regional board, state board sanctioned this program. They want the data. We have to post the well results on geo-tracker. People don't like that. They're scared of geo-tracker. They don't like being reported on state websites. And so that's a deterrent. Others are scared that we're going to take their water away. So if you find contamination, are you going to shut my well there? Or they get us mixed up with the GSAs and they're going to shut my well off. Or I mean, there's so much confusion out there that it's remarkable. We keep trying. We have to continue spending funding on a postcard. You can see on the last page. This is the look we're using. When we first started, we had a postcard that had about 500 words on it. We're now to about 20 words because it just seems like the simpler the message, the better. And of course, we always do English and Spanish. And you can see the numbers down there. We've mailed over 20,000 postcards to the people in our district multiple times, or in our management. So as you all work into your well mitigation programs, which I don't know a lot about, but I understand the GSAs are in various stages of developing those. We certainly want to work as closely as we can with you, help provide any of the data that we have available that might help in any of these problem identification. Or again, I'm reaching into uncharted territory. I'm still not quite sure how we can help you, but we're available. Let's do some brainstorming and figure out how we can mutually help each other. So that when you go in the front of the state board and we go in front, yes, we're doing as much as we can on any of the programs that the GSAs have. I'm not asking for any money either, by the way, if that would help you at all.
That's what I did have one question for you.
Sure.
So you talk about nitrates. Are there any other contaminants that which you would help state of quality water? Or is it
Well, yeah, we're mandated by the regional water board to do the nitrate testing because that's the biggest health issue, the biggest identified problem. When we expanded to the safer contaminants, we went to the labs, to the Gamma website, and looked at what else is here, and those were the only contaminants that had been showing up in drinking water. So that's why we're sampling from them. We didn't go on any fishing expedition, so to speak. We haven't looked for things that have never been found because there's no use doing that. That's in our opinion, it's a wasted effort. Let's try to test for what we know has been shown historically in these basins.
So it wouldn't preclude someone from if they found out they had arsenic in their water. It wouldn't preclude them from contacting you just because their nitrates were okay, but arsenic wasn't.
Well, yeah. So the short answer is anybody that has a private well can ask for a well test, and we'll test for all these contaminants. So that's the short answer. Now, if it's times arsenic and it's in a map disadvantaged area, then the state through SAFER will provide bottled water.
Here, I have a couple of questions to update me because I was heavily involved in this from about 4 years ago until 10 years prior to that. At the time, the state was pushing toward having to clean up the groundwater, which would probably take a couple centuries. Where are they on that currently in terms of requiring to clean up the groundwater and make it like drinking water?
In the process that went into developing the nitrate control program, there is an entity called CV Salt. And so CV Salt, that's an acronym for a very long name, which I won't cite you, but it's CV Salt, all the industry, state board, water board, state board, regional board, EWR, all around the table. And early on, before the basin plan, we did some very elaborate modeling to look at how much water would it take? Because you all know, you got a basin that's contaminated. How do you get that level down to below the standard? And they modeled and said, if you stopped all industry, stopped all farming, it would take 100 years of recharge to get enough water in there. And so the state said, okay, you got to have in your plan, the last part of it, you got to have a restoration program. And we've been writing in that section of our plans, very vague. We're going to look into it. But no, the short answer is there's nothing that we can do practically or afford.
But they still, in essence, have as a requirement. So
Yes.
my next question is, in terms of the cost to farming operations and trying to control this, it's not inexpensive, even with that, correct?
Right.
So when I look at this holistically, I think always looking at holistic solutions are the best. And one thing that left before we move forward with this, but if you start looking at all those costs to farmers, you look at the impracticality of cleaning up the groundwater. One thing that I thought should be studied from this holistic standpoint is to bring surface water to everyone and get rid of the wells. Don't have to worry about the groundwater then. You've already got fertilizer in the groundwater, the nitrates are there, and everybody's happy. Forget about the groundwater and provide surface water. I think when you look at that holistically, I'm not saying it is a solution, but it should be studied as a potential solution. So if I were to recommend something, I would recommend that holistic approach to see how that works. And if it does work, great. If it doesn't, maybe it addresses a great majority of the problem. And it's one thing that I've seen throughout my career as an engineer. Things are looked at way too piecemeal. I'm not condemning here. I'm just saying that's what I've seen throughout my career. So look at holistic approaches that address things from that standpoint is at least that is an option should be reviewed. So if I was to say something, if you could commission a study that looked at it from that angle, that's what I would love.
Well, yeah, there's two parts of that. So one thing that the GSAs are doing that are going to help the problem is recharge groundwater. I mean, that without a doubt, that is our best long-term natural solution, if you will. Not
truly practical.
It's not practical, but it'll help. Every little bit helps. You know, it's just same thing with supply. I guess looking at the way this, I mean, I know this map and these cities and streets back of my hand. I guess what I would look at it kind of like we did the IFAs. Where do we have facilities to start that? I mean, look at it holistically, certainly to study it, but then look at where do you have a surface water system that can be trunked to all these wells and find out what are the low-hanging fruit where we could start doing that. Because there's areas that are so remote that are 20 miles away from a pipeline or a pressurized system that would make that just impractical. But there's other areas
I would
around.
say maybe. I mean, if they've got problems with metals and stuff like that, it's going to cost them an arm and a leg at the time. It may be feasible. And so I wouldn't say it's absolutely out of the question, but it should be.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah. You get further south, though, there's not much surface water. Madera County out here, we're blessed, but you go further south, we're kind of hurt for those supplies and where that would work. But yeah, good suggestion though.
I did live in the country, and I actually did surface water without treating, used that in homes. And
No,
had a tank on the roof that gave us 50 gallons a month, and that's how we get for drinking and cooking.
that was from rainfall. That was in rainfall.
Well, it was delivered.
Oh,
And so rather than having bottled water, that was delivered to all properties that did not have a connection to surface water. That way everyone was off of groundwater and you didn't have this issue at all.
yeah.
There's another option.
Well, now that you mention that, we are talking to a firm in Lodi that does hauled water. And we're gonna start trying that out. They have a system that they call it a closed system. We gotta test it. All of our drinking water folks are skeptical. But it's a 57-gallon tank. You put it in your garage, you run a little spigot to your refrigerator or your sink, and it's purified water that's all to your house. Just, like I live out in the country, got a propane tank, and you're gonna have a water tank. Just kind of like what you're talking about.
So what I would say, if you combine those two, easy solution to get everybody off groundwater. You don't have to worry about eliminating all those farming costs, and we're done.
Yeah. Well, agreed. Farm irrigated ag pays about half of all these budgets. Yeah, just 60%. Anyway,
Appreciate you listening to my diatribe.
no, I'll come to you when I need a support letter on those.
Okay.
Are we gonna see some potential consolidation in the priority one areas? I know that you said it wasn't feasible to connect them all, but to connect good.
I had a really interesting conversation with William Wong. You know Will?
Did the state board?
No, I think that's.
No, he's a Modesto city. You know Will?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes,
This is City Modesto over here,
you know Will too. You should have Will come. I don't know how a good way to synopsize that. There's an ongoing battle between the city and the county. And when you offer services outside the city, they want to do sewer, they want to do the whole thing. They don't want to truncate. They don't want to trunk a line out a mile. And then if it's a DAC, then this part of town may pay for that part of town if they can't afford the water bill to run that system out to those houses. So that's looking at a real treetop, but there's a lot of challenges, and that just having things I don't understand is that I'm not an engineer, is that when you have that 2-mile pipe, you don't just put it in and turn the water on, it just runs all the time, no problem. There's maintenance, you got to have a certain amount of pressure. There's a lot of things that go into running pipelines, physical pipelines of drinking water to a long ways away. So those are things that need to be engineered and paid for. And at 1.5 million a mile for pipeline, I don't think we're going to put any time soon, frankly.
Are you getting resistance from the out of agency landowners? Or do they want the consolidation?
We're just starting those conversations. Really, we've had those 8 meetings, and we got a couple of people interested that said, yeah, city water sounds like that might be a good approach. But
Are you working closely with the state?
yeah, oh yeah, the Division of Drinking Water, you bet. They're the ones that we're talking about with the whole water situation, that we're looking into whatever, because they've had grants out there for years. These TA technical assistance grants, and we're trying to track, because they don't have a real easy place to go here. Where's all the project in Stanislaus County? It doesn't just pop up. I mean, you have to find out who's the TA, where have they gone, and then the LATCO. I guess we haven't tackled that yet. That's a challenge too. Anyway, we're just really 4 years into this. We're learning a lot. I'm an ag guy. I've been doing ag stuff for 20 years. This is learning a lot here on what the challenges are and what we got to do. And we want that 35 years. We need that 35 years, especially irrigated ag area. We can't do 10 below the root zone or underneath our corrals and yards. It's not there. We're not there yet.
What kind of response have you got from the P2 management area since you reached out to them?
Yeah, they're all in. I mean, so far we've got our second year funding budget done. They're all figuring out how they're going to raise the funds to make this happen. I mean, they all need that 35 years too. Even the municipalities that are on the older systems, the cost of those improvements are enormous. I mean, they're enormous. So they need that extra time as well.
I just go to regional meetings and I hear people from the state water board talk about how this extra money is going to go into supporting these consolidation efforts and how the state's going to do it. So it's just work closely with people seeing what happens.
Yeah, with both drinking water and wastewater. Because the wastewater is almost as big as issue as because these are all on septics. All these houses are on septics, and we started doing bacteria testing on that when we started Safer, and we stopped because then it became our responsibility to notify all these people that have bacteria in their wells. And it's like 70% of the wells have bacteria, and you got to notify them in 24 hours, and you got to tell them don't drink the water. And we said we're not doing that. That's not. We're not doing that. Anyway, so you have very interesting.
More for you. I got some questions for you too.
Oh, okay, sure.
Hopefully, you don't have to get going too quickly.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So let the record show that Paul will be stepping out here at 2:10. Okay, so I've got a couple questions for you. So there's a lot of opportunities to potentially collaborate in the future, which is good. We've got a draft agreement that you're kind of circling around in some of the other basins. So I'm gonna assign the TAC to look over that and then get some feedback, and we'll work with you, Perry, to get something to a point where we think it's workable. And then we'll bring it back to this group and we'll have a discussion, and then we can have time between that discussion and action by this GSA to get that in place. That will be the goal anyhow. So over time, we'll work through that. I think there are definitely some interesting things you brought up. So, see you, Paul. So we recently had a lot of comments with, we're working through management actions and our well mitigation plan. And with our management actions, we've had a lot of comments recently about cities getting onto surface water and taking surface water when realistically they've got groundwater that's high quality groundwater and they don't have to treat it and they don't have to put infrastructure in. And hearing what you said, you've learned a lot about that kind of scenario and how expensive it is just to get infrastructure out there. And that's not even the cost of paying for treated surface water or getting into the water rights picture or anything like that. So I think that's a really interesting piece of feedback and things that we need to keep in the consideration, and maybe, you know, forward some people your way and learn from that experience you've had there. The other thing, with, again, you touched on it, with the well mitigation plan, we're going to have to get temporary water service to these homes when there is a well that needs to be mitigated for as on a temporary basis. And so you're doing that through an outside company currently?
Yeah, what has happened in the bottled water industry is huge consolidation. There's one company that owns just about all the water purveyors, other than the real local small mom and pop thing. There's not many of them. But the company is Pure Water now, but it was Ready Refresh, it was Alhambra. All those names, when they send me an email, there's like 10 labels of water that companies that all sound familiar, they own them all now. And so they have a corner on the market, and they're being, even though we spend $400,000 a year with them, they raise the price every year. They know we have no other game in town to go to. This hauled water, I'm hoping, will be a solution to get away from bottled water. But yeah, we have a contract with them, and I'm hoping the hauled water issues that have been raised by our board will be resolved. One is bacteria formation in these tanks.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's been in business. He has a safer funding to do the drought dry well program. So Tulare County has tanks that they deliver water to when the well goes dry from a safer grant. And this started 7-8 years ago when the drought, before our latest wet season. Anyway, he's got a permit and a contract with the state water board to haul the water down. And it's similar to what you would see for a winery truck of stainless steel, or a milk truck stainless steel, and all the safety precautions. I think that really is going to be, well, let me back up. So that cost is comparable to bottled water. And I think it's better because you don't have to move the bottles around. You don't have to mess with moving bottles around.
Well, and so there's a little bit of difference, right? Because they're still using their well for everything else other than drinking water, cooking, and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So they still have pressurized water in their house.
Right. Yeah.
Because people that are going dry, they don't have that. So is this company providing that same service for people that don't have a well that's functioning?
I believe so, because the tanks that they use for this drinking water is 57 gallons, lasts about a month. The tanks they're putting on houses are 350 gallons. So that is a point of entry, delivery of the water, pressurized of the water.
So we've had this conversation at the STRGBA GSA as well, and they were going to reach out to self-help enterprises. I think they have something similar in place. So I don't know how much you coordinated with TID and what they're doing.
Yeah, we're actually going to get the well mitigation plan and management action committee is going to get a presentation here soon from self-help. So we're going to be looking at that too. For potential collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind it is it would be the stopgap while we are able to repair wells or modify wells or drill wells. There's a stopgap.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this company I'm talking about is contracts with self-help.
Okay. And then I read in here that gave me the impression through some of these slides, and I didn't hear you say it, there are only disadvantaged communities and low-income homes and households able to get this
No, the testing's open to all. The safer grant is the one that has income limitations. So that, just a deeper drill on that, is if a disadvantaged community wants an RO system, the state will pay for that, but they have to prove their income. And it's not a cap, it's not a 20 to 30,000, it's how much do you make? And they look at it and say, that's low enough income. And we have a hard time getting people to answer that. Most won't.
So if you'll test the well, you'll tell them whether there's a problem. If they're low income, they may get their system paid for. If they're not, then they would have to go out of pocket. Okay, they wouldn't get a system paid for.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the 123T, there's been a few wells that we've seen with that, and that is a vaporizing hazard, an inhalation hazard. And so that has to be a point of entry activated carbon treatment. That's about the size of a water heater that the water coming into the house for taking showers and drinking is treated. And I think we've got 3 of those in so far.
Okay.
All point of entry.
And it sounds like long term, basically this isn't going away. It's going to continue.
No.
So yeah, okay.
I
Interesting.
mean, for this comes through here, 35 years you'll be talking about it, but
Not this old man.
not this one either.
So the important thing,
But
right?
yeah, it's long term.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not gonna solve it, especially in the irrigated ag and dairy. We can't meet that standard in 10 years. I don't think we can't guarantee 100%. Wastewater treatment plant, you can do that. You can go denitrification, and there's a lot of things that can be done. But irrigated ag and dairy, the data is showing that we're putting on too much fertilizer in some areas.
Yeah. And so we're still addressing it from that angle too.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a long period of time to address the problems that we've already had.
Long time.
It's been created. Okay. So with the GSAs, it's important that we don't duplicate efforts. That's why we want to coordinate, obviously. And just so everybody understands, GSAs are not required to address water quality issues. However, we need to be coordinating, and we need to prove to the state that we are coordinating, and we're looking at it in our annual report, which is what they reported on last time. Todd Groundwater provided a presentation on our annual report and kind of the status. And so we're looking at it every single year to make sure that we're covering our bases to ensure that our groundwater management is not impacting or affecting water quality, moving plumes, things like that. So very good. Yep, I'm gonna have some public comments now. So anybody in the room who wants to step up first, go. Yeah, come on up if you'd like, or you can sit there too, whatever you're more comfortable doing.
And then,
We can hear you on this.
so it seems like with the water quality, the only long-term solution would be to move to surface water for some of these areas. And there is a cost to adding wells, deepening wells, and all the projects that you've got. And you have access to government funding, state funding for improving the water quality. And you're also having issue with people stepping up and saying that they want help or accept the reporting. And I can understand that because you're talking about disadvantaged areas. There's a lot of people that live in the shadows, and they're not going to come up and tell anybody anything because they're scared about a lot of things.
Right.
And so I think that it's a moral issue now too, is the quality of water for these people. And if you can work out a way where you can get the government to say, okay, the only long-term solution for the water quality, which will also help the groundwater, is to provide funding not only for emergency relief with the bottled water, but we have to provide the infrastructure, especially for the disadvantaged areas.
Right.
And then California looks really good. And we don't have to go directly to these people who really, they're not going to want to talk to us.
Right.
And then, I think that was the main gist.
On our application, we say right at the beginning, none of your information will be used for any immigration contact or otherwise. We say that anyway, whether that works or not, but that's about as far as we're going.
No, I get that, but the people that step up, there are a lot of people in the airport district where my kids went to junior high.
Mm-hmm.
And they are living in an area and they're scared of their ex-husband and they're scared of everybody. And I've sat next to them in working with teachers and education, and they don't get listened to and they don't get any respect and they get beaten up and they're scared they're going to be sent away. They're not gonna step up and they're not gonna ask for water and they're not gonna ask for help and they're just gonna slide.
Yeah.
So if they,
And we've
it's
been
not very,
searching for ways to reach into that community. It's, I mean, we were this bit in the environmental justice community.
Mhm.
They have as difficult time as we do, if not harder. I mean, they go there with translators. We can't use translators, but they have a hard time getting past
because the
barrier.
government sends their mom back to Mexico where the
Yeah,
kids are at
well,
school. It's got a real reason. I mean, but we've
Yeah.
got to work out a way to help them. And I think
Understand.
maybe just tackle it from a different way. If you can explain to the state, hey, we need to come at this from two angles, provide the water, and we need to get them on surface water so that we have a real solution for this area, and then you don't have to ask them.
Agree.
That was it. Just I think surface water is
Always looking for ideas how to reach this Democrat. Well understood.
Actually, has some comments for.
Oh, great.
Sure, over here. So first and foremost, thank you for the work you do. I think it's actually pretty spectacular. Eric actually covered one of the first things I was going to say, which is the one thing I think, generally speaking, we want to probably be a little weary of is GSA activities in terms of groundwater, as you mentioned. We really just look at things hydraulically. So our responsibility is really looking at, is the water high, is the water low, and how do we manage that? And as far as water quality goes, we just got to make sure that what we do to benefit the aquifer doesn't make it worse, not necessarily make it better. Not saying it's not important though. Obviously, every agency within their jurisdiction has to report to the state board and manage water quality within their jurisdiction. So there might be opportunities there. I know you guys have already reached out to the individual agencies on that front, but that might be the easiest way is really working with the jurisdictions that oversee the groups of people here. And I know there's already been some efforts there. It's hard to cascade those down. We've dealt with similar things. For example, right now we have a septic to sewer program that's going on. We're in county pockets, we're actually trying to get people off of septic and we're using pursuing grant funds and things of that nature. Same thing. So the exact same thing with people being afraid of being caught in some nefarious activity or something that could be perceived as a nefarious activity, even if it's not. That's going to result in further issues for them and their families. So that's always going to be a constant issue that we just need to find different ways to attack. There's definitely opportunities there, but working mostly with a lot of the local agencies, and sometimes even you've gone as far down as the EJ, which is good. Usually they can reach the people because they usually show they're part of the people and they're for the people. And there's definitely opportunities there. The one thing I lastly wanted to really comments on was the in terms of collaboration. So I don't speak for Will per se, and he's always open, his line of communication is always open, but the city, specifically of Modesto, and I'm sure this applies to other cities as well. We all just, at the end of the day, we're governed by what the council does, these elected officials that represent the public. So at the end of the day, any regionalization efforts, specifically at least internally within our group, we're actually pretty pro regionalization and collaboration, but it's always a matter of being able to justify that. We're not necessarily negatively acting our constituents. If there's a way to be able to communicate that upwards to where there's clearly a shown of mutual benefit and that it's not necessarily having one group of people in her cause, as you mentioned earlier, for another group, then it's easier to move forward down those pathways. So that's just a matter of keeping those conversations open and really building a solid case for why this is a good project. Grants are competitive as well. You talk about cost for extending pipelines and so forth, and even more so now, a lot of the state grants that they even have a shred of federal funding, they'll be scrutinized for things that they qualify for DEI, environmental impact, and all these different things. So that's also going to make things a little tougher. But lastly, I guess the main thing outside of that I really wanted to address was that it's still worth to keep trying. That line of communication is always open, at least with the city of Modesto specifically. It's just a matter again of making sure that we have the data and that they can do it fairly in a different way, shape, or form. But no, you guys are doing great work. I think at least my personal suggestion, and I'm not a decision maker by any means. It's definitely worth always going down lower sometimes at this level, especially where we're not necessarily responsible for water quality in that aspect. It may not always make the most sense, but that's really the main thing I guess I want to express. But otherwise, I think you guys do great work.
Yeah, one of the things that I have as a personal goal, and before I start walking out the door, is I think the communication about water right now is very poor. I think the confusion between, they hear a little bit about GSAs, they hear a little bit about water quality. There's too many, there's not a water message. And especially for private domestic wells. I've been talking to the State Water Board Communications Group about, we gotta be saying the same thing. Yes, water, your quality, your supply, but it's confusing to a lot of people. We did that canvassing that I mentioned, and a lot of people thought that if their well's contaminated, they're gonna close their well down. And that's kind of an offshoot of what the GSA misinformation is about, is they're going to turn the farmers' pumps off. And they relay that, I think, to their own personal well. This program is after my well, you're going to shut me down. That it is so incorrect. But we don't have anything to put in their head other than that's the wrong message. And so and this is impossible, but I like doing things like that. There's these big silos in Sacramento. There's water quality, regional water quality, but no water, and DWR. And they don't talk as much as they should. I mean, about these kind of macro issues. So I'm pushing the communications person, Jackie Carpenter. She knows me well already. We gotta get this messaging straight between these two agencies. We don't just need water supply, surface water, groundwater, water quality. I mean, there's got to be, I don't know what it is, but it's got to be a unified message so people, when they hear it and they see a logo or they hear a message, they can get what they need and get the information, understand it simply without talking hydrogeology speak to them. Anyway, that's my little closing comment. Appreciate the time today.
Yeah. Anybody else in the public here? If you have a couple minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Is this your problem nitrogen wells? Are they associated in sandy grounds or heavier grounds, or wells that were drilled in the 50s and shallower wells? It's just not simply they need to go deeper and blank out the top half of that well. What are you finding there? Or where the source is?
Only anecdotally that the highest nitrate area is west of 99 in that sand block from Ilmont to Salida. Sandy ground, shallow groundwater, been farmed in dairies 400 years. But wastewater, everything else before, in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It took a long time to get these aquifers contaminated.
Is it shallow wells?
Yeah, the top.
I mean, the wells are shallow too?
Yeah, the wells are
1950s?
Right, 50s and 60s, not some of them not well sealed. You just look at the well casing sometime, you can tell that thing wasn't ever sealed.
And it's not cheaper in the long run to, like, hey, maybe this $12,000 well, this drilled new well, 300 feet deep and blank off the top 150, gets better water versus bottled water or water systems.
I'm smiling because I feel like a 4-year-old kid that is just getting the bottled water part done. And yes, exactly what you're saying. We've got to figure out those long-term solutions because we're paying $1,000 a year for a family, $1,200 a year. So 10 years, 12 grand, and yeah, it's forever as far as we know. And it's going to be costly, but there's got to be some, it's not going to be one size fits all in all of these areas. It's, that's all the same, but every area is going to, maybe the surface water will work consolidation. Maybe you got to sink wells, maybe all the 5 neighbors there get one well deep and then pipe it together. It's going to be different for all these areas. But yeah, sandy ground that's the clay, those clay layers.
The nitrogens don't hold it.
Yeah, they don't hold it. Right. Exactly.
Can you clarify who's paying for this too? I don't think you really went into that in your presentation, right? Who all has to be paying for this? And if you're the Modesto Basin, is it all irrigated lands or is it?
Irrigated lands are paying about $3, $2 an acre.
All irrigated lands.
All irrigated lands. They pay to my former employer. East San Joaquin has annual dues for their growers.
Yep. And
for surface water monitoring since 2001, they added another $2 an acre for this program. And then irrigated, then dairy. And so we have the think of the pie in my explanation. Our pie is our budget. We have a $1.8 million budget. And so irrigated ag is paying 57%, dairy's paying 20%, cities are paying 15%, and food processor, winery, those other sectors are paying 20%. I'm guessing at those numbers, roughly that though. And so every year what's our budget, 1.8 million, all right, we split that amongst all of them and they go within their industry, things like that. So it's all, and that's part of why we gotta do this right, is the growers are paying for you guys and the growers are paying for us and dairies and city, yeah, so that's part of the reason we really need to collaborate.
Yeah.
So we can go to them and say, not duplicated efforts. We're spending your money as efficiently as we possibly can. And I'm of the old co-op idea. That's why you see that map on that page. And I'm thinking you don't need 7 executive directors. You don't need 7 staff to answer the phone. We do it in one entity and expand the personnel as we need it for the whole base. And hire engineers when we need engineers. So far, so good.
Anybody else in the room? Anybody on the phone?
Quick question. When you guys put on these filtration systems, do you ever have to do any type of troubleshooting? Like if there's issues with the well and you can't put the filtration system on because you have to fix this first?
Well, for the RO system, yeah, I mean, all again puts the systems in, and you gotta have a certain amount of pressure. We don't cover the cost for that. We cover the cost to put in that filtration. Anything to do with above ground is the homeowner's responsibility. So we're not covering that. Yeah, because that can be pretty elaborate. We got a really old well with an old half worse that's half dead. I mean, it's sorry. It's not pressurized adequately. You can't use RO.
We're not out, I'm sure.
All right. Anybody else here? All right.
If you know anybody who's got a private well that hasn't sampled, send them over.
All right.
Seriously.
All right. Thanks, Barry.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll be in touch. Okay, item number 6 is the next meeting. So our next regularly scheduled meeting would be April 9th. Unless something comes up in the meantime, that's likely to be canceled just because we've had this second meeting in March. So likely to be canceled due to lack of essential business items. Don't be surprised if you see that come up, and we likely just move on to the next meeting, regularly scheduled meeting in May. Questions or comments on that approach? From the public? Questions on the next meeting? Okay. So item number 6. Item number 7 is committee comments and reports. So we don't have a website update yet, but we are meeting with the vendor on Monday, MID staff and myself, and we will have more information and a timeline for transition and going live after that meeting. So expect that at our next regularly scheduled GSA meeting. An update on the website update. An update on the website. The workshop. So we continue to meet as a committee, and we're working on developing meaningful content for the next meeting to ensure that we can get some feedback and give people time to provide their input and consider that. So we're hoping at the end of April. If not, then May is our goal to get another workshop going for the management actions and the well mitigation plan. Form 700, good job everybody, except for one of you have already talked to the one, but we're good there. So thank you for moving forward with that. You'll be happy you won't have to pay the $10 per day fee and fine on that. Any other committee reports or comments? All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mike.
Pretty good second.
Christy, there we go. What's your name on the list here? All those in favor?
Bye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion or meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.